Hello guys, welcome again to another tutorial. My name is Dorothy. In today's video, we'll be drafting the princess dart bustier. If this is something you are interested in, please watch the video to the end so you won't miss out on any detail or explanation. If you are new on this channel, you are welcome. Please do not forget to subscribe, comment and like this video. Thank you. Now let's get started with the video. I have my pattern paper here and other drafting tools, so now let's go ahead and draft. So right here at the top, here's this place you see me directing. I will rule a line, an horizontal line of about ½ an inch, and this line will be serving as a shoulder line and I will be labeling it as so. From the shoulder line, I'll be marking my bust point length, my under bust length and the waist length. If you're making a blouse, you have to consider the blouse length as well. So from my shoulder to my bust point is 10 inches. I mark that. Then from my shoulder to my under bust is 14 inches. I mark that as well. Then from my shoulder to the half length is 16 inches, and I also add 1 inch for sewing allowance. So I mark all these points and I'll be using my ruler to connect these points horizontally. Then I went on to label all the lines that I just ruled. On the shoulder line, I divided my shoulder measurement by 2. My shoulder measurement is 15 inches. So when I divided it by 2, I had 7.5 inches. So I marked 7.5 inches on the shoulder line. Right here on the point, I marked my shoulder measurement. I will come down by 8 inches for the armhole line. To get the armhole line, you simply divide your bust circumference by 6 plus 1.5 inch. And whatever you have is the armhole line. So right now, I'll go ahead and connect this point I just marked on the straight line like this, and I will also extend this line horizontally like this. So this line is now my chest line. Next on, I divided the armhole line by 2 and I marked the midpoint. On the midpoint, I went in by 0.5 inch, which is ½ an inch, and mark it. Then on the chest line, I divided my bust circumference by 4 and mark it. My bust circumference is 36. 36 divided by 4 is 9 inches. So I mark 9 inches on the chest line. Now I will use my ruler to connect these 3 points together to create the armhole depth. To create the neckline, right here on the shoulder line, I marked 3 inches as the neck width. Then I came down and marked 3 inches as the neck depth. This is the standard neckline measurement, and this neckline is for the front pattern. Okay, so right now I will use my curve ruler to create a round neckline like this. For the shoulder slant on my armhole line like this, I'll come down by ½ an inch and mark it. Then I'll use my ruler to connect this point to the neckline. Now for the dart, on the bust point right here, I will divide my nipple to nipple measurement by 2, which is also known as bust span as well. So I'll divide it by 2. My bust span is 7, divided by 2 is 3.5. Then I add 0.5 inch to it and mark it on the bust point. Here on the under bust, I'll just be marking the actual bust span measurements, which is 3.5. okay, that is, I divided my bust span by 2 and I marked 3.5 right there. I'll do the same thing on the waistline and also the same thing on the actual length of this pattern. Now I will use my ruler to connect all these points that I just marked like this. On the armhole line, I will come down by 4 inches. Then I will connect this point to the bust point like this. Now the center front is ready. Now let's go ahead and work on the side front. For the under bust curve, I will go out by 1.5 inches on the under bust line, and I will connect this point on a straight line all the way to the length of this pattern paper like this. After this, I will use my curve ruler to curve this point on the under bust to the bust point like this. For the armhole dart, the 1.5 inches I marked on my under bust, I will mark same 1.5 inches on the armhole line. So from this point on the armhole line, I will come down by 1.5 inches. Then I will use my curve ruler to connect the 1.5 inches point on the armhole line to the bust point. Now you can see that the bust shape is coming out. Me looking at these two lines, you will know that one will be shorter than the other. So to confirm that, I will use my tape rule to measure the two lines. When I measured this first line, I had 13 inches, and I also went on to measure the second line as well, and I had 12 inches. So this second line is short by 1 inch. I went on to replace the 1 inch on the second line. Then I will use my ruler to extend the line like this. So now this armhole curve is no longer needed. Now I will use my curve ruler to create a new armhole depth just like this. This is now our new armhole depth. Now let's go ahead and mark our bodice measurement. So here on the chest line, I divided my bust circumference by 4 and I marked it. Then the dart that I took on the armhole line, when I measured it, it's 1 inch. So I replaced the 1 inch dart on the chest line. Moving on to the bust point, you can see that there is no dart intake here. So I just divided my bust circumference by 4 and I marked it on my bust point. My bust circumference is 36 and 36 divided by 4 is 9 inches. So I marked 9 inches on my bust point line. Next on the bust line, I divided my underbust circumference by 4 and I marked it as well. My underbust circumference is 30 and 30 divided by 4 is 7.5 inches. Then I marked that and I will also measure the dart that I took on the underbust line, and when I measure this is 1.5 inches, so I replaced that on the underbust line. Moving on to the waistline, I did the same thing as well. My waist measurement is the same as my underbust measurement, so I divide my waist measurement by 4 like I said. It was 7.5 and I marked that. Then I measured the dart that I took on the waistline and I replaced that. Then on the length of the pattern, there's the allowance, I did the same thing as well. I divided my waist circumference by 4 and I marked that. Then I measured the dart that I took and I replaced that. Okay, hope this is clear. So after marking all these points, I will use my ruler to connect all these points together. So now that I have connected all those points on a line like this, I went on to add a 1 inch sewing allowance to it. You can as well not add any allowance now, maybe until you're transferring the pattern to a fabric, then you can add all the sewing allowance. So after adding this allowance, I will connect the points as well on a straight line or on a line. This part I am shading will be the part I'll be cutting out. So let's cut this out. So our front pattern is ready. Here is a center front, while here is a side front. So I'll keep this aside while we work on the back pattern. So I have my pattern paper for the back part here ready, and I went on to rule this horizontal line of about 1/2 inch. This line will be serving as the shoulder line. Before I start marking the horizontal measurements, I will first of all mark the zipper allowance. So right here from the shoulder line, I mark 1.5 inches for the zipper allowance, and I'll mark this 1.5 inches all the way to the length of this pattern. Then I will use my ruler to connect all those points on a straight line. So this is the zipper allowance. So I will label it out. So from the shoulder line, I came down by 10 inches for the bust point. We don't need the under bust measurement because there is no bust at the back. So from the shoulder line, I still came down by 16 inches for the waist length, and I also mark 1 inch allowance. Then I will use my ruler to extend this point that I just marked horizontally. Then I will label each of the line that I just ruled. So now on the shoulder line, I will divide my shoulder measurement by 2 and I will mark it. My shoulder is 15 inches. When I divided it by 2 is 7.5 inches. So I mark 7.5 inches on the shoulder line. On the point I mark my shoulder line, I came down by 8 inches for the armhole line. To get the armhole line, you divide your bust circumference by 6 plus 1.5 inches. Now I will use my ruler to connect this point on the straight line. Then I will extend this line horizontally as well, which will serve as the chest line, just as I did for the front pattern. So I'm simply doing what I just did for the front pattern, nothing much and nothing serious. Okay, on the armhole line, I simply measure the armhole and I mark the midpoint. Then on my chest line, I divided my bust circumference by 4 and I marked it. Now I will use my curve ruler to connect the midpoint on my armhole line down to my chest line to create the armhole depth. For the back neckline, I marked 3 inches as the neck width. Then I came down by 1 inch for the neck depth. Now I will use my free hand to connect all these points together to form a round neckline. For the shoulder slant, I simply came down on the armhole line by 1/2 inch. Then I will use my ruler to connect this point to the neckline. So I extended the neckline to the zipper allowance like this. So let's go ahead and mark our dart. On my bust point, I divide my nipple to nipple measurement by 2 and I marked it on the bust point. At this point, I didn't add any allowance to it at the bust point. So I marked the same thing on the waistline and also on the length of the pattern. So now I'll use my ruler to connect these points that I just marked on a straight line. To create the princess dart for the back pattern, I will use my ruler to connect a line from the bust point to the midpoint on the armhole. So after creating the princess dart curve, for the dart leg, you can go and measure 0.5 inch on both sides of the dart leg. But for me, I won't be measuring anything there because I don't want the bust point area to have any gaping, so adding a dart or not is totally optional. Here at the armhole, I will extend this line by 1 inch just like I did for the front pattern, and I will use my ruler to extend this line like this. Then I will use my curve ruler to create the new armhole line, just as you can see me doing. Now let's take the body measurements for the back pattern. Here at the bust point, I divided my bust circumference by 4 and I marked it. My bust circumference is 36 and 36 divided by 4 is 9 inches, so I marked 9 inches on my bust point. Then on the waistline, I divided my waist circumference by 4 and I mark it as well. My waist circumference is 30 and 30 divided by 4 is 7.5 inches, so I marked 7.5 inches on the waist. Then on the length of this pattern, I went on to mark 7.5 inches as well. After that, I just went on to add 1 inch sewing allowance to the bust point, to the waistline, and to the length of this pattern. Then I will use my ruler to connect this point that I just marked like this. To reduce the zipper bulge on this back pattern, because when we transfer this pattern to a fabric, we will not want our zipper area to have this bulge or gapy look at the back. So on the zipper allowance, I went in by 0.5, then I connect that point to the zipper allowance itself. Then I'll go ahead and cut this out. We are basically done with this pattern drafting. So here is the center back and right here is the side back. Okay, now we have come to an end for the drafting of this princess dart bustier. Thank you so much for watching this video to this point. Please do not forget to subscribe, like, and comment on this video. Bye. See you all in my next one.